Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work at a small business that has been operating in the same location for over 15 years. Our building sits on a corner lot with a main entrance facing the street and a service gate in the back that leads to our rear yard. That gate is crucial for our operations because it's the only way large delivery trucks can access our storage area when we get shipments of heavy equipment or bulk materials. We don't get these big deliveries very often, maybe once a week at most, sometimes less. But when we do need that gate, we absolutely need it clear. The city has designated it as a no parking zone with proper signage, and for good reason. The whole area is marked with yellow curbs and everything. For years, we used to park one of our service trucks in front of the gate just to keep the spot clear. It worked pretty well until some drunk driver slammed into our truck one night and totaled it. After that incident, my boss decided it wasn't worth risking our vehicles anymore, so we stopped blocking the gate ourselves. That's when our problem started. About 3 years ago, this guy started parking his brand new silver Lexus right in front of our gate every single morning. This man was something else. I nicknamed him the Peacock because of his ridiculous grooming routine. Every morning, like clockwork, he would pull up in his fancy car, turn off the engine, and then spend a solid 3 minutes fixing his appearance. First, he'd pull out a small mirror and a comb from his suit jacket pocket. Then he'd spend forever adjusting his hair, checking it from different angles like he was getting ready for a photo shoot. After that, he'd straighten his tie, smooth down his shirt, and spray himself with so much cologne that we could smell it from inside our building when the wind was right. The whole performance was ridiculous, but what really got under my skin was how he acted like he owned that parking spot, like it was his personal reserved space or something. The first time it happened, I went outside to talk to him. I politely explained that he couldn't park there because it was a no parking zone for our delivery gate. He looked at me like I was crazy and told me he didn't see any problem, since he wasn't blocking anything. When I tried to explain that we needed the space clear for trucks to access our yard, he got dismissive and told me he didn't see any trucks around, so he was staying put. Then he just walked away, heading to whatever office building he worked in nearby. I was stunned by his attitude, but I figured maybe he just didn't understand the situation. The next day, there he was again. Same routine, same spot, same attitude when I tried to talk to him. This time I explained that even though we don't get deliveries every day, we never know when one might show up, and city ordinance prohibited parking there regardless. He got all huffy and started going on about how he pays taxes just like everyone else and has as much right to park on the public street as anyone. When I pointed out the yellow curb and the signs, he accused us of probably putting up fake signs illegally. That's when I realized we were dealing with someone who thought rules didn't apply to him. So we started calling the police. The process was always the same and incredibly frustrating. An officer would come out, take pictures of the illegally parked car, make us file a report, and then give us a list of towing companies we could call. They'd usually recommend which company would respond fastest, and we'd have to pay for the tow ourselves and hope to get reimbursed later. The first time his car got towed, he walked into our office red-faced and furious. He demanded to know what we did with his car, screaming about how this was theft and threatening to call his lawyer. I handed him the police report number and told him the name of the tow company where his car was waiting. He kept ranting about how we'd be hearing from his attorney, but I just stayed professional. But the next morning there he was again. Same spot, same grooming routine, same entitled attitude. We towed his car again and again. This went on for 2 solid weeks. Each time he'd come in angrier than before, making threats and accusations. He actually did follow through on his threat to sue us, filing some ridiculous lawsuit claiming we were harassing him and illegally having his car towed. He also filed multiple complaints with the city, claiming we were abusing the towing system. The lawsuit went nowhere. Of course, we had police reports, photographs, and city ordinances backing us up. The city complaints were equally frivolous, but this guy just wouldn't give up. Every interaction was the same. He'd storm in complaining about how we were costing him hundreds of dollars in towing fees. I'd tell him to stop parking illegally. He'd insist he had every right to park on a public street. I'd remind him it was a no parking zone. Then he'd go off about harassment and how he was going to keep fighting until we learned we couldn't push citizens around. The man was absolutely convinced he was the victim in this situation. In his mind, we were the bad guys for enforcing basic parking laws that existed for legitimate safety and business reasons. What made it even more infuriating was his complete lack of consideration for our business needs. We tried explaining that we had customers who needed that gate clear, that delivery trucks couldn't access our property when he was parked there, and that he was potentially costing us money and creating safety hazards. None of it mattered to him. One morning, my co-worker was dealing with him when he really showed his true colors. She asked him politely to find another parking spot since there were legal spaces just 2 blocks down. He told her flat out that he didn't care about our business problems and that he'd found a convenient spot and was using it. When she pointed out that it was illegal and he'd keep getting towed, he told her he'd just keep getting his car back and parking there again because we couldn't stop him. That conversation pretty much summed up his entire attitude. He knew he was breaking the law, he knew he was causing problems for our business, and he simply didn't care. In his mind, his convenience was more important than following rules or being considerate of others. After 2 weeks of this daily battle, something finally put an end to our parking war, though not in the way any of us expected. The street our business is on has some serious design problems. It looks straight when you're driving on it or looking at it on GPS, but it actually has these weird dips and curves that aren't obvious until you're right on top of them. The city tried to fix the section right by our gate by leveling it off, but that just created steep hills on both sides that make the curves even more dangerous. We'd seen plenty of minor fender benders over the years, and everyone in the neighborhood knew to take that stretch slowly. Unfortunately, not everyone got the memo. One morning I was in the office when I heard this incredible crash outside. It sounded like metal crumpling and glass exploding. I ran to the window and saw 2 completely demolished cars in the middle of the street. One of them was a familiar silver Lexus. The other driver had been speeding and hit the first curve too fast. He couldn't see the Peacock's car until it was too late because of the way the road dips right at that spot. Both cars were totaled beyond repair. Thankfully, both drivers survived, though they were pretty banged up and had to be taken to the hospital. But neither car was going anywhere except the junkyard. The irony wasn't lost on me. This guy had spent weeks fighting us over a parking spot that he claimed was perfectly safe and legal, and in the end, that same spot is what got his precious Lexus destroyed. After that day, we never saw him again. I don't know if he found a new job, moved away, or just finally learned his lesson about parking in dangerous illegal spots. But our gate has stayed clear ever since. This guy could have avoided weeks of towing fees, legal hassles, and ultimately losing his car entirely if he'd just walked 2 extra blocks to a legal parking spot. But that would have required him to admit he was wrong. And some people would rather crash and burn than do that. During summer months, I take my whole family on these work trips. My kids get to see the country while I work, and I get their company after long days troubleshooting equipment. But winter is different. The kids have school, so I'm on the road alone for weeks or months at a time. Sometimes this happens in summer too when my family has commitments back home. My wife never has to work a regular job because of what I make, but she does have to handle everything at home when I'm gone. This story happened during one of those solo trips when my wife was managing things by herself. When we first bought our house, we had incredible neighbors across the street. They were an upper middle class family who owned a bar downtown. They'd done beautiful work on their property, wrought iron fencing, landscaping, the works. Made our chain link fence look pretty shabby by comparison. They owned several nice cars, more than would fit in their driveway, so they always had 2 parked on the street in front of their house. Here's the crazy part though. For some reason, The local police had decided that no way could these people afford their lifestyle just from owning a bar. Every single month, police would show up with warrants and drug dogs, turning their house and cars inside out looking for evidence of drug dealing. Every month, they found absolutely nothing. No drugs, no arrests, no tickets, nothing. And every month after these raids, our neighbors would come over to apologize for any disturbance. They were embarrassed by these searches. We always told them not to worry about it, that this said more about the police than about them. My wife and kids are also from the same background, so we understood what they were going through and were happy to support them. Eventually, they'd had enough. They sold the bar and the house and moved to another state where they opened a new bar in a town with a larger community like theirs. Good for them. After they left, we had a string of renters in that house. Some were genuinely nice people who we helped out when we could. I gave one guy 2 broken down cars I've been meaning to fix up, and he managed to rebuild them into one working vehicle so he could get to jobs out of town. All I asked was that he haul away the leftover parts, which he did. Stand-up guy. But then the house got a new owner and everything changed. This new guy, let's call him the Rooster because of how he strutted around, bought the house and immediately declared himself king of the neighborhood. He wore expensive clothes and jewelry, walked around like he owned the whole street, and made it clear he thought he was hot stuff. The problem started right away. His family would park in our driveway or block our mailbox. When the mailbox is blocked, we don't get mail delivery. My wife would drop the kids at school or pick them up, then come home to find she had to park on the street because someone was in our driveway. She left polite notes on windshields asking them not to park there, but it didn't help. If they saw an opening in our driveway, they took it. Weekends were even worse. Not only would the entire street be packed with cars from his house parties, but the music was so loud it shook the windows in the back of our house. And it would go until 3, 4, even 5 in the morning. The Rooster had intimidated most of the other neighbors with his tough guy act so they wouldn't call the police about noise complaints. We did call. Their response was to turn the music up even louder after the cops left. Real classy guy. So this particular day, my wife comes home from picking up the kids, and there's a car in our driveway with a young woman sitting in it, just waiting. My wife parks on the street, gets the kids inside, then comes back out to talk to this woman. My wife politely asked her to move the car because she had no permission to park on our property. The young woman got defensive and rude, saying her uncle told her she could park there so my wife could just get lost. My wife explained that her uncle didn't own the driveway and couldn't give permission to park there. The young woman insisted that if her uncle said she could park there, then she could park there. Then this girl got out, locked the car, and walked across the street. My wife called after her that she could have the car towed. The young woman yelled back that my wife wouldn't dare. She clearly doesn't know my wife. My wife had already been thinking about calling a tow truck for months, but wanted to give them fair warning first. Well, now they'd been warned. But before calling a towing company, my wife had a feeling this might escalate, so she called the non-emergency police line to report the ongoing issues with our neighbors. When she gave them our address, the dispatcher said they already knew about those neighbors. Apparently, we weren't the only ones having problems. My wife was looking through the phone book for a towing company when there was a knock at the door. It was the Rooster himself, and he was furious. My wife is fearless. She opened the door and faced him down. The Rooster demanded to know how she dared tell his niece she couldn't park there when he had given her permission. My wife asked what made him think that mattered since he couldn't give permission for anyone to park on her property. The Rooster puffed out his chest and called her little lady, saying she obviously didn't know who she was talking to. He bragged that when he said something could happen, it happened. My wife actually laughed at him. He was shorter than her. She called him little man and said his tough guy act didn't work here. She told him that where she came from, men were afraid of women, not the other way around, and that women knew what rolling pins were good for. She offered to show him her nice marble rolling pin. This did not go over well with the Rooster at all. He started sputtering angry phrases about how dare she talk to him that way and that nobody spoke to him like that, mostly just making furious noises like a broken engine. Now my wife could see he was about to get physical. She took a stance ready to defend herself, maybe with a well-placed kick to his most vulnerable area. But she also noticed something he couldn't see in his rage. A police car had just pulled up behind his niece's car. So when the rooster raised his fist to hit her, my wife made a split-second decision. Instead of defending herself, she cowered a little and started crying, trying not to laugh while doing it. She figured she'd play the victim and let the situation work itself out. To her amazement, the punch never came. The police officer moved faster than she thought possible. The moment he saw that raised fist, he was out of his car, over the hood, over our chain link fence, and had the rooster's fist in his grip before it could swing. Very quickly, the rooster found himself wearing a new kind of jewelry, silver handcuffs. He was put in the back of the police car. More officers arrived. My wife played the perfect victim, talking about how scared she was of this man and what he might do to her and the kids while her husband was away traveling for work. She thought her acting was probably terrible, but it was good enough for the audience that mattered. The niece was forced to move her car off our property immediately. The rooster disappeared from the neighborhood for almost a week. The police mentioned there were some complicating factors that made things much worse for him, but they couldn't share details. We didn't really care what those were. For the entire rest of the time he lived across from us, the rooster never acknowledged our existence again. More importantly, he never allowed any of his people to park in our driveway, in front of our mailbox, or anywhere near our property. We only had one more all-night music party after that, but one call to the police ended the loud music permanently. Under his ownership, the house wasn't properly maintained and eventually fell apart. He sold it and moved on, probably to ruin another property somewhere else. It was like the opposite of flipping houses. My wife won that confrontation without even throwing a punch. The rooster didn't even qualify for the match. I run a small online business that sells specialty craft supplies and handmade items. It started as a side hustle when I was working at a corporate job, but it grew enough that I could quit and hire a few employees. One of my first hires was this guy who became my warehouse manager. He's been with me for 4 years now, and he's one of the most reliable people I've ever worked with. He's got 2 young kids and his wife has a chronic illness that keeps her from working, so this job is their main source of income. The business really picks up during the holiday season. We're talking about triple the normal order volume from November through December. Everyone's buying gifts, doing craft projects for the holidays. You know how it is. My warehouse manager works overtime during this period, and even with the extra hours, we're all stretched pretty thin. This whole mess started during our busiest week in December, about 2 weeks before Christmas. We were processing hundreds of orders daily, and my warehouse manager was pulling 12-hour shifts just to keep up with demand. That's when the mistake happened. A customer had ordered a set of specialized embroidery threads in specific colors for a Christmas project. Instead, my warehouse manager accidentally grabbed a similar-looking package containing the same threads but in completely different colors. It was an honest mistake. The packages were nearly identical, and when you're working at that pace for weeks on end, these things can happen. The customer received the wrong order and immediately sent an email. Not just any email, mind you. This thing was 3 paragraphs of pure rage. She was furious that her Christmas project was ruined, that we were incompetent, that we'd wasted her time. But what really got to me was the last paragraph. She wrote that I needed to fire the employee who made this mistake immediately. She said anyone who could mess up such a simple task didn't deserve to have a job, especially during the holiday season when people were counting on getting their orders right. She went on about how this person was clearly careless and unprofessional. I sat there reading this email, getting more annoyed by the minute. Here's the thing about my warehouse manager. He's never made a mistake like this before. In 4 years, his error rate has been less than 1%, which is incredible in this business. He stays late without being asked, he covers shifts when other employees call in sick, and he genuinely cares about the customers. When he realized he'd sent the wrong item, he felt terrible about it. I immediately replied to the customer with our standard response. I apologized for the error, offered to pay for return shipping, promised to send the correct item via express shipping at no charge, and refunded her original shipping cost. This was our usual policy for mistakes, and it typically satisfied customers. But not this one. She replied within an hour, rejecting everything I offered. She didn't want the correct item anymore because it would arrive too late for her project. She wanted a full refund, compensation for her time, and most importantly, she wanted proof that I'd fired the employee responsible. She told me that this was completely unacceptable. She didn't want my solutions. She wanted to know that I'd taken action against the incompetent employee who ruined her Christmas project. She demanded that I fire them, or she'd make sure everyone knew how terrible my business was. That's when I got an idea. A very petty, very satisfying idea. I waited 2 days before responding. During that time, I talked to my warehouse manager about the situation. We both agreed the customer's demand was completely unreasonable, but he was worried it might actually affect his job. I assured him it wouldn't, but I also told him about my plan. He thought it was brilliant. Then I crafted my response. I thanked her for her feedback regarding the shipping error. I told her that I took her complaint very seriously, and I appreciated her insistence that action be taken in this case. I explained that I had actually been building a case to remove this employee from the company for some time, and her complaint helped me seal the deal. I mentioned that she wasn't the first person to express concerns about his performance. I wrote that, thanks to her complaint, I had given him his walking papers. I described how he was very upset when I terminated him. I told her that he even cried a little and asked how I could be so heartless as to fire him just 2 weeks before Christmas, especially since he was the sole income provider for his family with 2 young children and disabled wife. I explained that I simply told him that he had upset the wrong customer. I wrote that I explained to him that Santa wouldn't be visiting his kids this year because of his carelessness. I mentioned that, unfortunately, he also no longer qualified for his year-end bonus, which he was counting on for Christmas expenses. I thanked her because her complaint was going to save the company a significant amount of money in salary and benefits. As a reward for bringing this matter to my attention, I told her I was making her $8 purchase completely free. I said she didn't need to return the incorrect item and to consider it our gift to her this holiday season. I thanked her for helping me make the tough decision to let him go right before Christmas, writing that it was customers like her who helped businesses maintain their standards. I hit send and waited. The response came back within 6 hours. It was the longest email I'd ever received from a customer. She must have written and rewritten it several times because it was filled with corrections and deletions. The tone was completely different from her previous messages. She wrote that she never meant for someone to lose their job, especially not right before Christmas. She explained that she was just angry about her project and said things she didn't mean. She begged me to tell her that I could hire him back. She offered to pay for the correct item, pay extra shipping, whatever it took. She wrote that she kept thinking about his children not having Christmas because of her. She said she had trouble sleeping knowing she caused this. She asked about his disabled wife and his 2 kids, wondering what she had done. She mentioned that she was crying when she typed the email. She pleaded with me to tell her there was something she could do to fix this. She promised to delete any negative reviews and recommend our business to everyone she knew. She just wanted me to give him his job back. She insisted she never wanted this to happen and apologized over and over. The email went on for 2 more paragraphs, each one more desperate than the last. She offered to pay his salary herself for a month to send Christmas presents to his children, anything to undo what she thought she'd caused. I waited another day before responding just to let it sink in for her. I wrote back that I appreciated her concern, but unfortunately, the decision had been made and couldn't be reversed. I explained that the employee had already been told and we'd begun the process of finding his replacement. I told her I understood she was upset about the timing, but she was very clear that action needed to be taken immediately. I said we simply gave her what she asked for. However, I mentioned that I did appreciate her change of heart, noting that it showed character to admit when we'd made a mistake. I wished her a wonderful holiday season. She sent 3 more emails over the next week, each one begging me to reconsider. She even offered to write a formal letter of recommendation for him and to post positive reviews about our company on every platform she could find. Meanwhile, my warehouse manager and I were having a great time reading these emails together during our lunch breaks. He was working his regular schedule, getting his regular pay, and looking forward to his year-end bonus just like always. The whole thing had become our favorite running joke. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.